Imagine you are a United States Army Special Forces Master Sergeant. You have served this country for 18 years. You have signed non-disclosure agreements swearing to protect classified information with your life. You personally know, that in a matter of days the most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere is going to be captured in a secret pre-dawn military raid. And instead of sitting on that information and doing your job, you open your phone, create a new account on a crypto betting website, and start placing bets. $33,000 in, $409,000 out, in less than 2 weeks. And then you try to delete your account and pretend it never happened. That is not a movie plot. That is the verified, court-documented federal indictment story of United States Army Master Sergeant Gannon Ken Van, 38 years old, of Fayetteville, North Carolina. A man who helped plan and execute one of the most audacious special operations missions in modern American military history, and then used the classified secrets from that mission to commit what federal prosecutors are calling clear insider trading. Illegal under federal law, a betrayal of his oath, and one of the most brazen financial crimes ever committed by an active-duty American soldier. This story has everything: a secret raid, a dictator in handcuffs, a crypto gambling website, a cover-up attempt, a photograph on the deck of a warship at sunrise, and a federal indictment that has sent shockwaves through the military, the intelligence community, the world of prediction markets, and all the way to the Oval Office, where President Trump, when asked about it, said, and these are his exact words, "That's like Pete Rose betting on his own team." Stay with me, because the full story is even wilder than the headline. Let's go back to the beginning. January 3rd, 2026. It is the middle of the night in Caracas, Venezuela. United States Special Operations Forces execute a classified military raid on a residence in the Venezuelan capital. In the pre-dawn darkness, they seize Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores. Both are placed in handcuffs. Both are transported to the USS Iwo Jima, an American amphibious assault ship positioned offshore. 2 days later, on January 5th, photographs flash around the world of Maduro and his wife arriving at a Manhattan helipad in handcuffs, escorted by heavily armed federal agents, heading into a federal courthouse in New York City. The operation was called Operation Absolute Resolve. It was the culmination of years of U.S. pressure on Venezuela, a country that had descended under Maduro's 23 years of socialist rule into economic collapse, authoritarian repression, hyperinflation that wiped out the savings of millions of ordinary Venezuelans, and the largest refugee crisis in the entire history of Latin America. More than 7 million Venezuelans had fled the country by 2026. The United States had been offering a $15 million reward for Maduro's capture on drug trafficking charges since 2020. The Justice Department had indicted him years earlier on charges of narco-terrorism, accusing him of flooding the United States with cocaine while deliberately weaponizing drug trafficking against American interests. He had clung to power through rigged elections, violent crackdowns on opposition, and the support of Cuba, Russia, and Iran. On the night of January 3rd, 2026, American Special Operations Forces, the most elite, most trained, most classified soldiers the United States military has, flew into Caracas and got him. It was historic. It was stunning. And Gannon Ken Van was right there in the middle of it. According to the federal indictment unsealed in the Southern District of New York on April 23, 2026, Van had been involved in the planning and execution of Operation Absolute Resolve from approximately December 8, 2025 to January 5, 2026. That is nearly a full month of participation in the planning and execution of a classified military operation. He had access to sensitive, non-public classified information about the timing, the mechanics, and the expected outcome of the mission. He had signed non-disclosure agreements, multiple non-disclosure agreements, promising in writing to never divulge, publish, or reveal by writing, words, conduct, or otherwise, any classified information he accessed in connection with his service. Here is what he did instead. On December 26, 2025, 10 days before the raid, Van opened an account on Polymarket. If you are not familiar with Polymarket, here is the quick version. Polymarket is one of the world's largest prediction market platforms. It is based in Panama, outside the reach of U.S. regulators, though American users can access it through a virtual private network. It runs on cryptocurrency, specifically USDC, a dollar-pegged stablecoin. Users buy yes or no shares on the likelihood of real-world events occurring. Will this election result happen? Will this country take this action? Will this person still be in power by this date? The contracts are priced between $0 and $1. A contract trading at 10 cents means the market thinks there is roughly a 10% chance of the event happening. If it does happen, it resolves to $1 and you collect the full value. The more accurately you predict and the earlier you bet before the odds reflect the true probability, the more money you make. In plain English, if you know something is going to happen before the market knows it, you can bet at very low odds and collect a massive payout when it does. That is exactly what Van allegedly did. The Maduro removal contracts were trading at very low probabilities before the raid because the broader public had no idea the operation was coming. Van, who knew it was coming down to the exact day, bought at those low prices and watched them pay out at the maximum value within hours. It is the financial equivalent of betting on a game you already know the final score of. The day Van opened his Polymarket account, he transferred approximately $35,000 from his personal bank account into a cryptocurrency exchange account. He funded his new Polymarket account with those funds. And then, between December 27, 2025, and the evening of January 2, 2026, one day before the raid, he placed 13 separate bets across 4 prediction market contracts. Every single bet was a yes position on the same set of outcomes. U.S. forces in Venezuela by January 31, 2026. Maduro out by January 31, 2026. Will the U.S. invade Venezuela by January 31, 2026? Trump invokes war powers against Venezuela by January 31, 2026. His largest single bet was placed on January 2nd, the night before the raid. $32,537 on a single contract predicting that Maduro would be out of office by January 31st. That one bet returned a profit of over $404,000, a 1,242% return, in less than 24 hours. In total, Van bet approximately $33,034 across all 13 trades. In total, he pocketed approximately $409,881 in winnings. He turned $33,000 into more than $400,000. Using information that the American people had paid for with taxpayer-funded military operations, information that existed because young Americans in uniform had risked their lives to gather it, information he was legally, ethically, and morally obligated to protect. And then things got very interesting, very fast. On the morning of January 3rd, the pre-dawn raid happened. Maduro was taken. President Trump posted on Truth Social in the early hours announcing the successful operation. And within hours, that same day, January 3rd, Polymarket resolved several of the Maduro and Venezuela-related contracts to yes. Van bets paid out instantly. He immediately withdrew the majority of his winnings from his Polymarket account. The same day the raid happened. He took the money and moved it, sending most of it to a foreign cryptocurrency vault before depositing it into a newly created online brokerage account. He was also, according to the indictment, photographed that same day on what appears to be the deck of a ship at sea, at sunrise, wearing U.S. military fatigues and carrying a rifle, standing alongside 3 other individuals in U.S. military uniform. That photograph was taken and uploaded to Van's own Google account. The indictment says federal investigators found it there. Now here is where the story takes a turn that should honestly make you think twice about how smart criminals actually are. Because Van made one of the most basic mistakes possible for someone trying to hide a financial crime. He used his personal email address to open his Polymarket account. His personal email. The same email that had his real name attached to it. So when news outlets and online researchers started digging into the unusual trading patterns in Maduro-related contracts, which happened almost immediately after the operation was announced, because several large, suspicious, perfectly timed bets were very publicly visible on the platform, and when reports of likely insider trading in those contracts started appearing in the press and on social media, Van reportedly panicked. On January 6, 2026, 3 days after the raid, Van contacted Polymarket and asked them to delete his account. He claimed he had lost access to the email address associated with it. That was a lie. Federal investigators say that on the same day, January 6th, he also changed the email address registered to his cryptocurrency exchange account to a different email, one that was not in his name, and which he had quietly created back on December 14, 2025, 3 weeks before the raid, 2 weeks before he opened his Polymarket account. He had created a burner email address in advance, and still used his real one to actually open the account. Polymarket did not delete the account on Van request. Instead, according to its chief legal officer Neil Kumar, the company identified the suspicious trading activity, referred the matter to the Department of Justice, and cooperated fully with the federal investigation. Kumar posted on social media after the arrest, "It is not anonymous. You will be found just like this guy." Polymarket later published enhanced market integrity rules to combat insider trading. Their statement on the day of Van arrest was blunt. "Insider trading has no place on Polymarket. Today's arrest is proof the system works." The months-long investigation that followed involved the DOJ and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which regulates prediction markets in the United States. On April 23, 2026, a federal grand jury in the Southern District of New York returned an indictment against Gannon Ken Van. He was charged with 5 counts: unlawful use of confidential government information for personal gain, theft of non-public government information, commodities fraud, wire fraud, and making an unlawful monetary transaction. The CFTC filed a parallel civil complaint the same day. The maximum sentences, if convicted on all counts, are staggering. 3 counts under the Commodity Exchange Act carry a maximum of 10 years each. The wire fraud count carries a maximum of 20 years. The unlawful monetary transaction count carries a maximum of 10 years. Van is 38 years old. He has been on active duty since 2008. He was promoted to Master Sergeant in 2023. He was stationed at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina, the home of Joint Special Operations Command, the unit that oversees the Army's Delta Force, Navy SEAL Team 6, and other Tier 1 special mission units. He served his country for 18 years, and now he is facing potentially decades in federal prison. U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton for the Southern District of New York said it plainly at the announcement. Prediction markets are not a haven for using misappropriated confidential or classified information for personal gain. Those entrusted to safeguard our nation's secrets have a duty to protect them and our armed service members, and not to use that information for personal financial gain. But there is one more dimension to this story that makes it even larger, because Van is not alone, not even close. According to the Associated Press, a separate group of brand new accounts on Polymarket made highly specific, perfectly timed bets on whether the United States and Iran would reach a ceasefire on April 7, 2026. These accounts were new, created close to the time of the bets, and they generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in profits from contracts that resolved in their favor with stunning precision. Another separate Polymarket user, still unidentified at the time of this recording, made roughly $550,000 through a series of bets related to the U.S. striking Iran and the removal of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. $550,000. From bets placed with the same suspicious, perfectly timed precision that characterized Van Maduro trades. On the same day the AP published its report about the Iran ceasefire trading, the White House issued a formal warning to all staff against using private government information to trade on prediction markets. That is not a routine memo. A White House warning of that nature means the administration has already identified, or suspects, that there are current or former government officials, possibly multiple, who have been doing exactly what Van did. Van is the first to be charged. He is almost certainly not the last. The Kalshi prediction market, Polymarket's main U.S.-based competitor, also made news this week by fining and suspending 3 congressional candidates from Minnesota, Texas, and Virginia for what it called political insider trading. These candidates were allegedly betting on the outcome of their own elections on the platform. The entire prediction market industry is under a spotlight it has never seen before in its short existence, and the fundamental legal and ethical question at the center of all of it is the same question that Van case forces into the open. When does knowing something before the public knows it cross the line from smart investing into federal crime? And then there is this final detail. Donald Trump Jr., the president's son, is a paid advisor to both Polymarket and Kalshi. He signed on to advise both platforms last year. President Trump himself, when asked by reporters in the Oval Office about Van arrest and the broader pattern of insider trading on prediction markets, said, "The whole world, unfortunately, has become somewhat of a casino." He added, "I was never much in favor of it. I don't like it conceptually." He compared Van to Pete Rose, the baseball legend who was banned from the Hall of Fame for betting on his own team, At least Rose bet on his team to win, Trump noted. Van bet on his mission to succeed. The president said he would look into it. What we have here is a story that touches almost every major institution in American public life. The military, the intelligence community, the financial system, the prediction market industry, which now allows millions of Americans to bet on world events in real time. The question of whether classified information is safe when the people holding it can turn it into $400,000 with a few taps on their phone. And the fundamental question of trust. The trust that the American people place in the men and women who carry classified secrets and who swear in writing to protect them. Gannon. Ken Van is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. He has not yet entered a public plea, and his defense attorney had not been publicly identified at the time of this recording. But the indictment is specific, detailed, and supported by digital evidence including account records, transaction histories, photographic evidence, and the testimony of Polymarket itself. This case is not over. More charges in the prediction market insider trading space are almost certainly coming, and the question of how prediction markets should be regulated and who should be allowed to use them is now sitting directly on the desk of Congress. This is a story about greed, betrayal, and the dangerous intersection of classified military power and an online casino built on world events. It is a story about a man who served his country for 18 years, reached the elite rank of Master Sergeant in the United States Army Special Forces, participated in one of the most historically significant clandestine military operations in a generation, and threw it all away for $400,000 and a crypto wallet. It is a story about how a technology that barely existed a few years ago has created an entirely new category of federal crime. And it is a warning, not just to military personnel, not just to government officials, but to everyone, that in the age of blockchain and digital transactions, the paper trail never disappears. You cannot delete your way out of it. You cannot change your email and make it go away. The receipts are permanent. Gannon Ken Van is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. He has not yet entered a public plea, and his defense attorney had not been publicly identified at the time of this recording. But the indictment is specific, detailed, and supported by overwhelming digital evidence including account records, transaction histories, blockchain data, photographic evidence placing him on the USS Iwo Jima the day of the raid, and the full cooperation of Polymarket itself. This case is not over. More charges in the prediction market insider trading space are almost certainly coming, and the question of how prediction markets should be regulated in the United States, whether they should exist at all in their current form, who should be allowed to use them, and how aggressively the government should pursue those who abuse them, is now sitting directly on the desk of Congress, with no clear answers yet in sight. What happened here will be studied for years, in law schools, in military ethics courses, in financial regulation classrooms. A soldier who carried America's most sensitive secrets decided those secrets were worth more to him personally than they were to the mission he swore to protect. And now the entire country is watching what happens next. If this video gave you the full picture of one of the most fascinating federal cases of 2026, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment below. Do you think Van deserves the maximum sentence? Should prediction markets like Polymarket be banned entirely in the United States? Should soldiers who carry classified information be prohibited from trading on prediction markets? This comment section is a conversation, and your opinion absolutely matters. Subscribe to John Cooper and turn on notifications. We cover every major U.S. story with the depth, the detail, and the honesty it deserves. We will be following every development in this case and in the broader prediction market insider trading investigation as it unfolds. See you in the next one.